Imagine getting shot 11 times, 4 of those being in the face, losing some of your favourite body parts, surviving not 1 but 2 plane crashes, getting attacked by nature's most evolved beast, and then doing a full-on Andy Dufresne. Seems impossible, right? Is this the toughest man in history, or just the luckiest? Let's find out. Welcome to the insane story of the real-life John Wick. Adrian Carton De Wiart was born on the 5th of May 1880 into a wealthy Belgian aristocratic family. His parents never could have guessed the life he'd end up living. Despite a privileged upbringing, Adrian yearned for combat and adventure. After being sent to the UK for university, he snuck away, faked his name and age, becoming Trooper Carlton, and signed up for the British Army. His first deployment was in the Second Boer War, where he was shot in the stomach and the groin. He was sent home due to his injuries. This is when his father discovered that he had left his studies in the UK and was absolutely furious, but he let him continue with his passion for war. By the age of 20, he had already gained experience in leadership, tactical combat operations, and hardships. Shortly after recovering, De Wiart was stationed in Sudan. While swimming in the Nile, he was attacked by a crocodile, but he managed to fight it off, sustaining only minor injuries. Additionally, he contracted malaria, both of which reinforced a dedication to physical fitness. By 1904, he was already a lieutenant, and in 1907, having served 8 years for the British Army, took an oath to the King and became a British citizen. Just a year later, he married Countess Friederike Maria Caroline Henriette Rosa Sabina Franziska Fugger von Babenhausen. Christ. Here's a fun fact. Their great-grandson actually successfully tracked down Shamima Begum. World War I. When the war broke out, De Wiart was en route to British Somaliland to fight in the Camel Corps. Yes, they rode camels into battle. Here a war was underway against followers of Mohammed bin Abdullah, and whilst attacking an enemy fort, a bullet left a splinter in Adrian's eye. Moments later, a bullet went through the same eye. Another took off half his ear. He declined surgery until getting back to Europe, and in January 1915, his eye was removed. High Command was reluctant to sending him back out, due to thinking his visible injuries would make the British look weak. They told him he had to get a glass eye, so he did. But on the way back from getting the glass eye, he threw it out the taxi window and replaced it with his signature eye patch. Just a month later, in February 1915, he travelled to the Western Front to command in Flanders. In one battle, he was standing next to his second in command, who would say to him, "I wish you would duck when those shells come." But Adrian was a firm believer in fate. Moments after, a shell hit very close to them and Adrian was thrown a fair distance. After reorientating, he noticed a hand on the ground. It was the hand of his second command, who had perished. He continued moving with his troops down the bombed Menin Road when the silence was broken by a German ambush. De Wiart was instantly in a pile of his own blood. He quickly picked himself up and ran through the fire back to the lines. Here's a quote from his memoir. "My hand was a ghastly sight, 2 of the fingers hanging by a bit of skin. All the palm was shot away and most of the wrist. For the first time and certainly the last, I had been wearing a wristwatch and it had blown into the remains of my wrist. I asked the doctor to take my fingers off. He refused, so I pulled them off myself and felt absolutely no pain in doing it." In December of 1915, he had enough of the doctors trying to save his hand and had it amputated. Adrian had learned more valuable lessons in this time. He realised the importance of his role. An invisible commander would lower morale. Putting himself in danger by leading the way would inspire his troops. And in 1916, it was back to war. On July the 3rd, De Wiart led his men to attack La Bouzelle, one of the Germans' strongest positions. Everywhere was completely flattened, dead wherever you looked. The leaders of the 2 other squadrons were either hurt or dead, and rather than using a messenger, Adrian decided to run between them, communicating his own orders. They then all happened upon a most unhealthy spot and a magnet for shells of every size. De Wiart was yet again knocked to the ground, bleeding heavily. He had a bullet through his ankle and found that the whole back of his head had been blown off. Luckily, it missed everything important. After extraction, it was a 3-week hospital visit. Here he gained the Victoria Cross for his courageousness in the previous battle. He was urged by doctors and generals not to return, but as soon as recovering, it was back to the front lines once again. And yet again, his visit was short-lived, after a large piece of shrapnel became lodged deep inside his hip and almost lost his leg. Adrian learned in hospital that his fame as the unkillable soldier had spread. Shortly after recovering, he made his 5th and final return to war. This was because it was the end of the war. Adrian had survived the Great War, and no one can argue that he wasn't lucky, but also Adrian's craziness and his determination was completely unmatched. At one of the battles, he famously commandeered a car and drove it into heavy enemy fire to carry troops and supplies as horses were in short supply. This is a great example of his adaptability and resourcefulness. De Wiart was also well known for enjoying whiskey and cigars amidst battle. When asked about his time in the war, he replied, "Frankly, I enjoyed the war." De Wiart was then sent to Poland to help in their conflicts as second in command for the British. Poland were at war with almost every bordering country. Within this stint, he suffered his first plane crash. It had been shot down. After surviving in the water until the German fighter had finally run out of ammunition, they got picked up and held in Lithuanian captivity. Luckily, he was released shortly after and returned to England. Upon returning back to Poland, he was attacked by the Red Army whilst on a train. He fought them off single-handedly from the footplate of the train with a revolver. He even fell off onto the train tracks, but somehow managed to get back on. Adrian would retire from the army a couple of years later with the rank of Major General. 15 years would go by of him living on a large Polish estate until getting recalled for the Second World War. In 1940, he was tasked with leading a force to occupy the town of Namsos in Norway. They were instantly attacked by a German fighter. The Luftwaffe turned the town into dust. With low supplies and virtually no artillery, De Wiart led the forces over a mountain where they were met by the shells of German destroyers. They were also being bombed from the air and being attacked by German troops on skis with machine guns. The campaign was a failure, but he made it out alive and arrived back to base on his 60th birthday. A year later, he was made head of the British Yugoslavian military mission and was flying to Cairo when both his engines failed off the coast of Libya. Upon getting knocked out on the hit, he regained consciousness due to the cold water. De Wiart then swam a mile to land whilst carrying another wounded. Don't forget, he only had one arm. Upon reaching land, they were captured by the Italians, who controlled Libya at the time. He became a prisoner of war for 2 years and was described as a delightful character who must hold the record for bad language. He and 3 other high profiles attempted to escape 5 times. The wildest attempt was a success. They tunnelled for 7 months at a length of 60 metres and at the age of 62 was eventually free. Adrian walked for 8 days, covering 150 miles in northern Italy until being recaptured. Eventually, De Wiart was taken out of prison and to be given civilian clothes as he was going to be taken secretly to Lisbon to send a message about a peace treaty with the UK. However, his one condition, that it was to be a suit as good as out of Savile Row Mayfair. He didn't trust Italian tailors and, I quote, did not want to resemble a gigolo. Carton De Wiart arrived back in England shortly after. Post-World War II, Adrian retired from the military. He wrote a book with his memoirs about his insane life called Happy Odyssey, which I highly recommend reading. He also helped out in military matters and shared his knowledge with the leaders. Even upon aging, he stayed active and remained a famous and inspiring person. Adrian Carton De Wiart passed away in 1963 at 83 years old. He left behind a story of bravery and determination that still inspires people today and will for many years. There truly has never been anyone more similar to John Wick than Adrian Carton De Wiart. If you liked this insane life story, here's another. I'm David, and this has been Most Amazing Everything. Thank you for watching. If you've got this far, please subscribe and like. Maria, Caroline, Henriette, Rosa, Sabrina. Oh my god, what?